Welcome to the Mason Duchatschek Show. And before we jump in, this episode is brought to you by workforcealchemy.com, helping leaders uncover hidden profit leaks inside their workforce. John Mollura works with leaders who are done tolerating distraction, misalignment, and diluted priorities. He focuses on what he calls unfiltered importance, helping executives cut through noise, make sharper decisions, and operate with clarity when the stakes are high. His work centers on simplifying complexity so leaders and teams can focus on what actually drives results. So happy to have you here today. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
So, you talk about unfiltered importance. What does that actually look like in a real business setting when everything feels important?
Yeah. And what it feels like, what it looks like is, as leaders, there is no shortage of information we're being bombarded with at all times. Right? Whether it's from the dings on our phone or computer, the people calling us, the to-do list that's a mile long that has things on there from 3 months ago that we haven't let go. Like, there's no shortage of things that all feel important. And it can be very difficult to filter out what is actually the next right step when we have just all this stuff in front of us. So a lot of what it is, Mason, is we just need to hit the pause button sometimes. I always tell people, it's like, just say to yourself, just halt. Like, what do I need to do next? Like, let me just take a couple of breaths and actually take stock of what I have, because it's so easy to be reactionary, right? Like next thing, and then you feel like you haven't done anything.
It's fascinating because one of the reasons I invited you on is because this is something I struggle with.
Yeah.
And I have to remind myself on a regular basis that you can't eat an elephant in one sitting. It's one bite at a time. And I'm just super glad you're here. So when a leadership team says that everything's a priority, what's your process for forcing clarity without creating friction or messing with politics?
Yeah. The framework that I give people is HITS, HITS. And this is what leaders just need to write in the inside of their notebook, put it in their screen, just HITS, HITS, and that stands for HALT, first of all. So if you're getting the message that everything's important, you need to call time out as a leader, whether it's, on your own or as a team, and be like, all right, time out, everybody. Let's put everything up on the whiteboard, in our notebook, in a slide, whatever it is, and let's go to the I of HITS. Let's identify what's immediately important. Immediately important. Because there are some things that are time restrictive, right? Like, my kids' soccer practice ends at a certain time. It's pouring rain. I need to be there to hit that mark. So when do I need to back it up and leave? That's the immediately important thing. Do I need to get the order for, whatever supermarket we're picking our groceries up from? No, that can wait, but they can feel important. So halt, first of all, as a leader, just call time out. Doesn't have to be a big deal, but just take a breath, figure out what's next, what's immediately important, what has a time factor on it, right? And then T is take decisive action. Because so often we try to get it perfect, right? And then we round and round we go, and then we get wrapped around the axle. It's not perfect yet. It's not perfect. So which I say, just focus on excellence. What's the best you can do with the information you have?
And excellent now is better than perfect never.
Absolutely, 100%. General Colin Powell had his 70-40 framework. General Powell would say, if you have less than 40% of the information as a leader, that's reckless to make a decision with that. But if you have, 70% of the information, now you can lean on all that experience you have and make the next right decision and adjust as you go along. Because if you're waiting for 80, 90, 100% of information, you're going to take too long. You're going to stall out. So taking decisive action is about making the next right call. And then the S of HITS framework, Mason, where I see so many leaders, whether they're a physician, a founder, academic, where they just go off the rails. They do all the things. They halt, they identify what's important, they take action, but they don't set a specific deadline. They don't give themselves I need to do this by, and then checking in with themselves, whether that's writing it down, whether that's sticky notes, whether that's reminders on your phone, on your household device. Set a specific deadline, because nothing like a deadline to get moving, right? So that's the framework I give leaders. HITS, halt, identify, take action, specific deadline.
So, where do most executives, in your opinion, unintentionally dilute their own effectiveness on a regular basis?
One of the biggest things that happens is they don't set clear directives to the people that they're leading,
That's
right?
true.
And by that, I mean setting the objective. What's the requirement for completion? What's the end goal? Don't tell them how to do it necessarily. That's not leading. That's building doers. Don't do that. You're there to build other leaders. But if you clearly communicate, here's the objective, gang, here's where we need to end up by this time, right? Set that specific deadline, cut your team loose, let them do it. Let them know that if something comes up that they're not going to hit that target, they need to communicate that ASAP. So that's probably the biggest leak that I see for leaders is they don't set a clear success criteria with a clear specific deadline. And then also remind their team, check in with me if something's going to be off of that.
I'm going to chime in here because for those watching or listening that might be early career professionals who have aspirations of executives, because most of the folks listening here are business owners, executives, CEOs, high level folks, and young executives who are looking to acquire the skills, knowledge, and experience so that they're prepared when those opportunities present themselves. But when I listen to what you're talking about, setting a specific guideline and communicating that to the people on your team, as a reminder for those of us who've been doing it for a while and something that might be new to some of the aspiring executives is I would encourage you to back that deadline up and give yourself some cushion. I was Army ROTC, and one of the things I learned was that if I was responsible for having my platoon ready for a formation at 7 a.m., I did not tell my squad leaders or my platoon sergeants that the formation was at 7 a.m. I told them they needed to be prepared, ready to go at 6:45.
Yep.
Why? Because then they could inspect everything. My sergeants had the chance to look at everything and make sure people had all of their gear. Everything was ready to roll. And if one or two people didn't have their act together, which happened,
Yep.
that takes another 5 to 7 minutes. And we're still 7 minutes early. And my unit is ready on time.
Yep.
And you're relying on other people. And I'm not saying that they're bad people or they're not trying hard. They're not doing everything they can within their power. But if you've got a specific deadline that you need to have something accomplished by, my encouragement to you is to back that timeline up, to build yourself in a little bit of cushion for rework or redoing some things that might not have been done to standard, if that's the case.
Yeah.
Anyway, and that's for early career professionals who might be listening.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a great way. I love that you chimed in with that, Mason, because that's all about setting yourself up for success. Because there's two things in life. There's what you can control or what you can't. You can't control the traffic. You can't control the flat tire. You can't control the not being able to find the parking space when you show up to give a keynote. What you can control is what time I get my oh, let me back up. I was going to say what time I get my butt out of bed. Let me back up even further. What time am I getting my butt in bed, turning my
Yes.
screen off? How am I setting myself up for success when I get my butt out of bed the next morning so I can give myself that cushion? So this all stacks up about setting yourself up for success. I'm so glad you chimed in on that.
Because my company commander didn't care what my circumstances were. You have to be ready to go at this time, period. It was as long as everything falls into place, as long as it's convenient, as long as you guys feel like it. Like those were not options. It's like,
Right.
this is the standard.
Right.
And it was non-negotiable. And I'm not going to be the one with a unit not prepared because I didn't think ahead.
Yep.
So
Absolutely. That's what I always told my test operation teams. Yeah.
can you share a situation where a leader was focused on the wrong things and what changed once that was exposed?
So I dealt with this all the time whenever I was in engineering. I did test operations for NASA and elite military units for 15 years. So our group's job was to make sure that whatever we were making, whatever whiz bang thing we were doing, that whether it's going on a fighter jet or going to Mars, that it was going to do what it needed to do when it needed to do it. So we would do lots of ground testing, space simulation testing, putting things on rockets, Wile E. Coyote style out in the desert, all kinds of cool things. But what it all came back to was meeting the specification that the government or our customer would provide to us. Because in there, we need to be able to check all these boxes that, hey, what we did or what we built is going to satisfy all these requirements. And here's the proof. not just because we think it should work. Right? That doesn't fly real well when you're sitting in a design review. Hey, it should work. Like my mentor always used to tell me, one good test is worth 1,000 opinions. So yeah. Oh, he was a fantastic mentor. He had lots of those. One good test is worth 1,000 opinions. But to give you an example where things kind of would go off the rails a lot of time would be scope creep. We weren't keeping track of what the requirement was and if the thing met it. Sometimes requirements would get added unofficially, and we're under contract to do XYZ. Well, when you start adding like XYZ 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like that's going to grow timelines going back to hitting the mark, budgets. So scope creep is something I saw all the time because it was so easy to be like, oh, well, we can make it better. We can do this. We can add that. And then in addition to scope creep, the other thing that I would see going off the rails would be we would meet a requirement. Let's say it had to, I don't know, be this strong, had to be 50, be able to hold 50 pounds. And we'd do the test and it would hit like 50.2 pounds. And we'd be check. And then someone would be like, ooh, I don't know, guys, that's really close. It's like, but it met spec. Yeah, but it's really close. It's like, no, it met spec. Don't let it get out of hand. Don't go chasing better when good enough is good enough.
What advice do you have? And this is a little bit off topic, but I'm curious, based on your life experience, what advice would you have for protecting yourself and your team from scope creep? Necessary scope creep. Let me put it that way.
Sure. Yeah, you're right. I mean, sometimes scope needs to creep. Like the reason why we do those tests is we learn it's like, ooh, okay, yeah, we didn't see that coming. That's why you do that. So the biggest way to protect yourself against scope creep is to, number one, be aware of what the requirement is in the first place.
Or why it's necessary.
Yeah.
What are you trying to accomplish? Instead of we need to make something that's going to hold 50 pounds. Well, why does it need to hold 50 pounds? What is its role in the overall big picture? And then when someone comes to you and says, hey, we need to do this, that, or the other thing, and they start creeping the scope, at least you have some idea of what the big picture is and why it may or may not be necessary and would theoretically be more capable of offering a reasonable opinion that, hey, we don't need to let this creep here because of that. Or maybe we do, and this is a good thing to explore. But I think I might have answered my own question there about the understanding the bigger picture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something you want to add to that? I mean, feel free.
Yeah. I mean, and my official title when I did test engineering was systems engineer. Nowadays, systems engineer is like associated with like computer and software and a bunch of other stuff I don't understand at all. But our title back then was systems engineer because we had to understand how the entire systems work. So we not only were testing our components, we were testing them at the system level. And a lot of times it was our teams that were the ones loading it on the fighter jet or loading it on the rocket. So we had to really have a great understanding of how everything worked. And to speak to your point, Mason, we were working a project for NASA one time. And by the time it got to me to review all the requirements, we were already under contract. And I said, this leakage requirement is banana sandwich, guys. Like, there's no way we can build anything that's physically going to meet this. And it caused a huge contractual issue. And I said, what's driving that? And they said, well, we did a calculation. I said, no. What's the reason for that? And they said, well, our inflation system on the spacecraft can only do this. I said, all right, well, let me talk to your inflation system, guys. And they're like, our tank's this big. It's got this much, gas in it at this pressure. And I just did a real quick calculation, like high school level calculation. I'm like, guys, we can have like 50 times more leakage than is in the contract based on that. And they're like, oh, okay, no problem. Let us just change it. But there were so many lessons learned there. It's like, don't just blindly accept something, like understand what the requirement is and understand if it's going to be a stretch based on past technology or past projects you've done, or if there is just something really out of kilter, and especially before you're under contract, because once you do that, that's when things can get really sticky, especially with the customer. If you go back and say, oh, yeah, by the way, we can't meet the contract.
I think you did a way better job of explaining that answer than I did.
It was a team effort, brother. It's a team effort.
Let's go with that one. So how do you help someone distinguish between what feels urgent and what is actually important when both are demanding attention?
Yeah. So I go back to, with my nerdy engineering background. It's like, what's the data say? Like what is the fact? Because if we can start to shift out of autopilot and get into awareness whenever we start feeling something's important, that's the operative word, like feel. Like I'm all for emotional intelligence and leading your team in an emotionally correct way. That's not what I'm talking about. But when we start being like, oh man, I really feel like I need to get this done, I say, why? Based on what? And I'll give you an example of that just happened less than 24 hours ago, Mason. I was working with one of my clients and they were talking about raising their prices on something. And I said, okay, well, let's talk that through. They're like, I got a lot of stories going in my head why I shouldn't raise my prices. I said, I get it. Very, very natural reaction. No shame in that game, but let's unpack that. And they said, I worry that if I raise my prices, I'm going to lose all my current clients or clients are going to walk away. And I said, very valid. I get it. Have you ever raised your prices before? They said, yeah, I raised them once before. I said, when was that? They said about 18 months ago. I said, okay, let's separate the data from the drama now. How many clients left when you increased your prices 20%, which is what we're talking about now? They said, no one left. I said, okay. So the only data you actually have is that your clients see such value in what you deliver to them and how you serve them. They were willing to absorb a 20% cost increase and no one left. True or true? He goes, yeah, that's true. I go, so based on that data, but do we feel confident now stepping forward? And he's like, well, hell, let's double it. I'm like, whoa, time out, brother. Let's talk this through. But that's a great example of whenever we we have these feelings, but the facts don't support it.
When you step into a company, how quickly can you tell if the leadership team is aligned or just appearing aligned? I mean, what are some of the signals?
Yeah. So a lot of it comes down to action. Like, what kind of actions are you taking? Because that's always my question. I'll be like, all right, what's the plan? Where are we at? Let's understand where we're starting from. Because that's the first thing. The second thing your GPS asks you after it says, hey, where do you want to go? It says, where are you? Where are we starting from? So once I start working with clients and I'm like, all right, this is where you want to go. This is your North Star. Where are we on the map? And it can become very quickly apparent, if people are just kind of spewing out word salad. And, if you're not familiar with what word salad is, those are, listeners, those are just the things that sound good. Like, we need to take, massive action. We need to really move the needle. To which I
We
always
need
say,
more synergy here.
that's right. Yeah. Pick whatever corporate speak you want. To which I'll always be like, okay, cool.
We need to shift the paradigm. We need to think outside the box.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm all right. Okay, well, what's your success criteria for that? How will you know when you are successfully outside of the box? How will you know when you've reached sufficient synergy? And like when they just like stare at me with like blank eyes, they're like, well, we'll know when we know. I'm like, BS. So it's like, unless you have like a clear objective, and that was what I got back into, like in test engineering. That's how I've been successful in, like, when I did commercial photography. Like, I understood the requirements of these Fortune 500 clients. Like XYZ, like, this is what we need for success. It's how I am successful with like coaching clients. Like, what are we trying to get to? And if we don't have a clear objective, we're just saying word salad, like, shifting paradigms. Let's figure out what the success criteria is first, gang, before we go shifting paradigms in our spaceship.
So when you start talking, you mentioned clarity. A lot of leaders say they want clarity, but they resist the trade-offs required to get it. How do you handle that tension?
Yeah, so helping people shift out of that tension, where a lot of times it can be scary to look at the data. A lot of the clients that I work with, one of the things that I make sure they're doing is filling out their business statistics. And like, we're not talking like, master's level MBA kind of stuff. We're talking like, how much money do you bring in and what are your expenses? And like, well over half are like, I have no clue. I have no clue. And I'd be like, all right, no judgment. Let's lean into curiosity and not judgment. That's one of my big things, is curiosity, not judgment. I'm like, without judgment, why not? What's the story you're telling yourself? And a lot of times, like, it comes down to it. They're like, I'm scared. I don't want to know what it says. And I'm like, I get it. I totally get it. but how can we make correct decisions? Again, separating the data from the drama. Like, this is business. Like, we need to make decisions based on fact. We need to extrapolate based on previous data with, with some judgment. So the first thing I do is I let them see that what they're doing, putting their head in the sand, is actually what's causing them to stall out. And now, once we can get out of that and we can start making clear decisions based on fact, man, that's when we can really start moving towards those North Stars that I help them develop.
Is it okay if I promote you a little bit here?
Please do. Yeah. Yeah. Mason, you're going to be my hype man.
This is one of the valuable reasons why consultants are useful to companies. And I can give you a real life example. I was doing some work with a company who was having very significant problems with employee selection, i.e. turnover and retention. And I sat down with the senior VP of HR, and there's a large organization, 1,000+ employees. And we actually plugged that client's actual payroll data from that day into what we call the human capital calculator. It's a system that can be utilized to analyze the data and let the data tell a story about what exactly is turnover costing you, what exactly is poor employee engagement costing you. And the numbers were staggering. And she took those numbers into a executive board meeting, CEO, chief financial officer, all of the chief operating officer, all those folks. And I was in that meeting also. And I watched them go, oh, there's no way that we aren't doing that bad. That's an example. There's no way. We don't feel like those numbers are accurate. We don't feel like that is right. We don't feel. And what did you say earlier? The facts don't care about feelings. She laid it out and said, I extracted this data from our payroll this morning. It's accurate to the penny. And you should have seen the look on their faces. Now, she couldn't have, I'm not going to say couldn't have because she was a very strong executive, but there's a lot of executives that justifiably would not have pushed back against the CEO or the CFO of operations against their feelings. But as a consultant who was there, I could say, like, I watched her do it and here's how she did here. And I gave her the confidence to say, hey, you're just telling them the data. You're just telling them the truth.
Right.
This is the emperor has no clothes moment. Are you going to remain silent? Are you going to tell them the truth?
Yeah.
And I had to encourage her to have the confidence to handle it.
Yeah.
And she stepped up and told the truth and she shared the data and and they might not like hearing it, but they respected her because of it. And they knew she was straight. But as a consultant, I was there to be able to provide her with the tools and stuff. And it's not like I'm giving you an opinion. I could give you the data. So that's a real life experience that I had that goes right in alignment with what you're telling me. And I wanted to share that for the benefit of those listening. So how do you coach executives to say no at a higher level without damaging relationships or momentum?
Yeah. And can you specify, like, as far as like an area of like saying no?
Well, in this particular, I think that there are some executives who feel the need to be collaborative and participative. And I would like your opinion here or your guidance there or your input there. And the people they're asking don't have the knowledge, expertise, or experience that the one responsible for making the decision actually has sometimes. And when you're that person and you're getting all this feedback and input from all these other people and you're not in the majority, you're in the minority. All these other people have their opinions that we should go this way. And you want to say no. How do you do that at this high level without damaging relationships or momentum?
Yeah. And
Does that help?
yeah. Thank you. Got it. Crystal clear. So people are messy, right? Let's just own it. People are the most challenging part of the whole thing. So a lot of it has to do with, and with any kind of communication, is when you're communicating, the goal of communication is not necessarily to get your point across. The goal of communication is to get your point across in a way that the other person will be able to hear it. So being a leader is understanding that you might have team members that very much just appreciate, hey, this is the data. This is where it's going wrong. Don't do this again. Do this. Some people love to be communicated to like that. And as leaders, we need to understand how people receive messages, because that same person that says, like, you didn't do this, we should have done this, do this now, If you walked up to him and said, "Hey, sweet spirit, how are you doing? How are we feeling today? Just checking in." Like they'd be like, "What do you want? I have things to do." Right? That they would not hear what you're going to say next. Conversely, if you walked up to some people and be like, this, and this, they might be a puddle of, goo crying on the floor for the next 4 days in HR. So as a leader, so to not damage the relationships, we need to make sure we understand that we're able to read other people, how a message is going to land well with them. So then we can craft it and deliver that message, again, based on fact. And you're not being inauthentic by changing how you deliver the message. You're delivering the same truth. As long as you're delivering the same truth, you're just delivering it in a way that the other person can receive that information.
Because I think back to times where I have been that person that had to make the unpopular decision, and in an effort to be collaborative and to see if there were some blind spots in my thinking, which there often are, like with anyone else. I've sat there and I've asked, and then I've gone ahead and gone with my original idea or my strategy or original plan that some of the others might not have voiced support for.
Okay.
In fact, he didn't voice support for it, but
Happens.
I owned it
Yeah.
and I was responsible for the outcome. And if it
Yep.
didn't work, I accept full responsibility. I asked them, they provided this input. I chose this route instead. I own it, not on them. So step one. But two, because I want them to contribute next time and I didn't want them to view me as an asshole, ASKHOLE. That's when you ask, that's your state opinions and you don't listen. I didn't want to be an asshole that they wouldn't help in the future. So I always took the time to, at least before the discussion started, to say, I've got this universe of inputs and I have some degree of uncertainty about what the next step is. Would value your input, but please know ahead of time that the things I'm asking about only comprise a small portion of the universe of inputs that I'm dealing with.
Right.
And if you had access to all this other stuff, you might think like I think right now, but I still have uncertainty in this little area, which is where I need your expertise and your help.
Yeah.
Then they understand that it's not like this is the whole picture and I didn't listen to them, but
Right.
this is this one small part and will be considered in a whole bunch of other stuff that I don't have the time to explain right now. And then that has seemed in several occasions allowed me to preempt friction and unnecessary drama
Mhm.
and lack of synergy.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That's beautiful, Mason. Yeah. That clear communication, going back to that communicating just clearly like, hey, this is what the status is. People don't need to know all the information. But another gem that my mentor taught me when I was in test engineering, he was former special forces. So they operate outside the normal, like, rank and file type mentality. So one of the things he carried over from special forces, going back to me, communication, was his up, down, and across framework that he just beat into my head. Up, down,
Share
and yeah, up, down, and across is all about making sure that the leadership above you, you're sharing up what's going on so they can, going back to what you said, so they can make informed decisions. Because as leaders, I'm sure we've made decisions and then subordinates come to us. They're like, what the heck is wrong with you? And you're like, well, I made the decision based on I know. They're like, that's completely wrong. It's like, well, that would have been great if I had known, right? Maybe you asked, maybe they didn't feel comfortable, like whatever it is. So up, down, and across is about first making sure leadership knows you're pouring into them so they can make decisions. The down part is making sure the people that you're leading, again, are getting the proper amount of information. Do they need to know everything? No, that's your job as a leader, is to be able to disseminate and distill in appropriate ways. But they need to at least know what's going on, just like you said, like circling back and like talking to them, being like, hey, this is what happened, this is why, moving forward this. And here's the step that a lot of times gets missed of the up, down, and across. It's the across. People at the same leadership tier as us. We just silo and compartmentalize ourselves because we're all going 100 miles an hour. But if we can really work on that across communication, because those are the people that if they're going to need to step in and bail us out, it's likely going to be the people at the same leadership tier. whether it's covering for us, whether it's adding personnel, like they're going to be the ones that have to do it. And I'm sure we've all been in situations where like you just get blindsided by something. It's like, what are you talking about? Why wasn't I made aware of this? Number one, we could have helped way earlier instead of getting called at 4 p.m. on a Friday and now my weekend's shot. Right. So up, down, and across framework, really speaks to what you said, which is so important, Mason, with making sure everybody that is in your little sphere of influence, up, down, and across, has the proper amount of information.
So, can you walk through a real example of simplifying a complex situation, maybe down to a few critical priorities, and what changes as a result?
Yeah. So, oh, geez, let me think here. So many times I would have been like, wow, we could have made that a lot simpler. So, okay. So, for instance, I was working with a client at the beginning of this year, and this is tying everything back in, like with the data. And they were saying, like, man, this is like the worst sales month we've ever had. I'm so frustrated and my numbers are garbage. And like they went through all these things, people and the staff and, being sick and all, all the things. And I said, all right, well, I let them go. And then finally I had to gently say, let's peel you down off the ceiling. Let's talk about the facts, because you just said a bunch of things that could influence it, but let's get back to the facts. I said, why do you feel this is so bad? He's like, well, I'm not having new clients coming in, like all the things. I said, okay, what does the data say? What do you mean? I'm like, well, how many new clients have you gotten? How many days have you actually been in the office? Because they have a 4-day work week, and it's based on clients coming in. He said, and how does that compare now to last year? Like, let's get real simple. They're like, well, last year I was in the office like 10% of days more. I'm like, okay, how much is your revenue down right now? They're like, about 10%. Said, okay, this isn't rocket science. Like, you physically haven't been there to earn cash. And you only earn cash when you are in the office for what you do. You've been in there less, you've earned less because your prices are the same. No ding on that, but do you see that now? They're like, got it. Okay, I guess I said, you'll pick it up at the end of the month just because the way the calendar's falling. They're like, right, yeah, I guess we're on track. Okay, cool.
What's amazing though, and this is why it's nice to have third parties come in. It's obvious to you, but sometimes the answers are hiding in plain sight and they can't see them. It's not them. I mean, they're busy. Their world is spinning. Everything's a moving target.
Yeah, it's a
Get
lot.
it.
Yeah,
But sometimes someone else can come in from the outside and they can just see it clearly and point it out. And it's like,
yeah,
it happens all the time.
yeah.
So if there was only one piece of advice of all of the knowledge and experience that you have, if there was only one piece of advice that you could give to those listening today or watching, what would it be and why?
I encourage people to practice pausing. Practice the pause, because whether it is getting ready to react to something, whether that's something someone said or something that you just observed or something that you think you observed or something that you started feeling, just pause before you react, because reactions are involuntary and reactions are without thought. We want to practice the pause so we can respond. Responding is intentional. Responding has some forethought. Responding is controlled. That's the reason why they're first responders and not first reactors, our police and firefighters and all that. So if we can practice that pause and build it in, and it can just be a beat, it can be a quick breath, or it could be a walk around the block. If we can practice that pause, that is going to elevate every level of your leadership, because that is going to have you be able to respond and not react.
That's great advice. So if
Thank you.
people want to know more about you, your company, the work you do, what are the best ways for them to connect?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. And the best way to connect is just with my name, John Mollura, because there aren't very many of us out there. So, on all the socials, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, even TikTok, because apparently that's where people are. It's just John Mollura. And my website is johnmollura.com, johnmollura.com/free stuff. Gets them to my free masterclass, which is where I teach them how to shift out of autopilot and into awareness, and also maintain that posture of curiosity.
Well, thank you so much for being here. And I hope that your socials get flooded with people who want to know more. I really appreciate your knowledge, your wisdom, your examples, your stories. So
Awesome.
much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Take care.